The Horn Frog Podcast. Let's talk sports with Coach Dub. The Horn Frog Podcast. Good afternoon, gentlemen. This is Coach Dub coming to you live from Rick's Cabaret, Fort Worth, with your Horn Frog Podcast. This Horn Frog Podcast, we're going to be talking about the top performers and top teams of the Big 12. And this Horn Frog Podcast is brought to you proudly by Rick's Cabaret, Fort Worth. Come early for the drink specials, but stay late for the entertainment. We're going to jump right into it, folks. Your Big 12 quarterbacks this season. Top performers, TCU quarterback Tavita Scipio, 293 of 365, 80% completion percentage, best in the nation. He also threw for 4,278 yards, good for third in the nation. He had 36 passing touchdowns, only 12 interceptions. He averaged 329.1 yards per game and had a QB rating of 204.6. Other notable quarterbacks in the Big 12 this season, FSU quarterback Doug Wilbur, 147 of 240 for 61%, 2,653 yards. He had 31 touchdowns, 15 interceptions, 221.1 points per game, and a QB rating of 184.2. Another notable quarterback, Michigan State quarterback Malik Hammer, went 222 at 336 for 60%. He had 2,833 passing yards, 24 passing touchdowns, but he had a whopping 26 interceptions. But he averaged 236.1 yards per game and had a QB rating of 133.1. We jump over to the running backs. TCU running back and Heisman winner Lee the Jet Epaul had 192 carries, 1,888 rushing yards, 25 rushing touchdowns. He averaged 145.2 rushing yards a game. He also had 99 receptions for 1,306 receiving yards, 15 receiving touchdowns, 100.5 receiving yards a game for a total of 245.7 total yards per game. What a season for your Heisman winner, Lee the Jet Epaul. Other notable running backs this season in the Big 12. Michigan State running back Byron Boudreaux, 197 carries, 1,006 yards, 5.1 yards per carry, and 13 rushing touchdowns. Now we're going to jump over to receiving. Best performances and top performances this season in the Big 12. North Carolina wide receiver James Dale had 100 receptions. And if I'm right, he led the nation. He also had 1,822 yards receiving, 15 receiving touchdowns. He averaged 151.8 yards per game. Also in receiving, TCU's Lee the Jet Epaul had 99 receptions. We've already been over this. 1,306 receiving yards and 15 receiving touchdowns. And another receiving outstanding performance this season, TCU wide receiver Gideon Sweet, 85 receptions, 1,250 receiving yards, and 10 receiving touchdowns. Now we're going to jump over to defense, folks. Your top tacklers on the season in the Big 12, TCU strong safety David Nkansa, 77 tackles. He also had 5 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks, 6 interceptions, 95 interception return yards, 1 fumble recovery, 2 defensive touchdowns, and 5 pass breakups. Other notable tacklers in the Big 12, Florida State linebacker Taylor Ortega, 75 tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 4 interceptions, 95 interception return yards, 2 pass breakups, a forced fumble, and a fumble recovery. Great season by Taylor Ortega of the Seminoles. Jumping into top sacks leaders in the Big 12 this season, TCU defensive end Ty Childress, 14 sacks. Also had 43 tackles, 22 tackles for loss, 1 pass breakup, 1 forced fumble, and 2 fumble recoveries. He had an outstanding season and looks to continue it in the playoffs. Other sacks leaders this year in the Big 12, Michigan State defensive end Matt Crisp, 11 sacks. He also had 38 tackles and 6 tackles for loss. Now looking at top leaders in interceptions for the Big 12 this season, you got TCU strong safety David Nkansa with 6 interceptions. We've already been over it. Other interception leaders were jumping to Michigan State cornerback Tim Cherador, 4 interceptions, 48 interception return yards. He also had 46 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, half a sack, a pass breakup, and a forced fumble. Now let's look at those top offenses in the Big 12 this season. That's going to be TCU with 7,510 total yards, good for second in the nation. They have 4,869 passing yards where they led the nation. They had 2,625 rushing yards, where they were third in the nation. They had 42 passing touchdowns, tied for fifth in the nation. Had 41 rushing touchdowns, where they were third in the nation. Averaged 49.3 points per game, where they were second in the nation, behind West Virginia, folks. And they also had 378 first downs, where they led the nation, and it wasn't even close, as the closest second was 322 first downs. What a season for TCU. Other notable offenses of the Big 12, North Carolina had 5,711 total yards, good for eighth in the nation. They threw for 4,529 passing yards, good for second in the nation. They rushed the ball for 1,132 yards. They had 47 passing touchdowns, good for third in the nation, and they had 22 rushing touchdowns. They averaged 43.1 points per game, where it was good for seventh in the nation, and they had 271 first downs on the season, good for fifth in the nation. Now let's look at those top defenses in the Big 12. That's going to be North Carolina, giving up only 3,134 total yards, first in the nation. 2,493 passing yards. And they gave up 641 rushing yards. They were the best rushing defense in the nation, folks. The North Carolina defense also had 32 sacks, 7 fumble recoveries, and 11 interceptions. The other top defenses in the Big 12 is going to be Florida State, 3,151 total yards, good for second in the nation. They had 2,335 passing yards, for good for fourth in the nation, and they held everybody to 816 rushing yards, good for second in the nation. They also had 45 sacks, good for sixth in the nation, 5 fumble recoveries, and 18 interceptions. Now we jump over to the turnover differential for the Big 12. TCU was plus 11 with 32 takeaways, which placed them at sixth place in the nation. They had 27 interceptions, good for fourth in the nation, and 6 fumble recoveries. Your other team, Florida State, plus 6 in turnover differential, 24 takeaways, 18 interceptions, and 5 fumble recoveries. That's your Big 12 Year 10 breakdown. You heard it here from Coach Dub. And this is Coach Dub signing off from Rick's Cabaret Fort Worth. Don't forget to come early for those drink specials and stay late for the entertainment. Till next time.